You know that loneliness that doesn't fade, even when you're surrounded by people. That feeling of being disconnected from the world while everyone around you seems perfectly integrated, laughing at the same jokes, sharing the same shallow concerns, living lives that make sense to them but sound strangely empty to you. It's that loneliness that accompanies you at the family gathering, where you smile politely, but feel like you're watching everything through a thick pane of glass. It's the sense of isolation that creeps in during a bar conversation when you realize no one there is really talking about anything that truly matters. It's the silent weight that settles on your chest on Friday nights when you see social media filled with people celebrating connections that seem so real to them but so impossible for you. You've tried explaining it to someone and seen that confused look, that quick response that you just need to get out more, meet new people, download a dating app, as if your loneliness were just a logistical problem of lacking physical company. But you know that's not it. You might be in a romantic relationship, have friends, have a present family, and still feel this unbridgeable chasm between you and the rest of humanity. It's a loneliness that hurts differently, that doesn't improve with distractions, that doesn't disappear when you finally manage to schedule that dinner with friends. It's an existential loneliness, and it whispers to you every day that there's something profoundly wrong with you, that you're broken in a way others aren't, that you'll never truly belong anywhere. And here's something no one has told you. What if this loneliness isn't a flaw in you? What if it's actually a sign of something extraordinarily important happening within you? Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz and founded logotherapy, discovered something revolutionary about existential loneliness that completely transforms how we understand this suffering. Through his extreme experience in the concentration camps and decades of clinical practice, Frankl identified that certain types of loneliness are not symptoms of mental illness or social inadequacy, but vital signs of an authentic search for deep meaning in a world that primarily offers superficiality. What you're about to discover can radically change how you see your own loneliness and give you real tools tested in the most brutal circumstances imaginable to transform this suffering into something with genuine purpose. The first sign that your loneliness has profound meaning appears when you realize you can no longer be satisfied with superficial conversations, and this puts you in an awkward social position. Frankl observed in his clinical practice that patients with what he called nogenic neuroses, meaning suffering originating in the spiritual dimension of the human being, frequently reported a growing inability to genuinely engage in conventional social interactions. These patients described going to social events and feeling as though they were playing a role, following a social script that everyone around them followed naturally, but which sounded artificial and meaningless to them. When someone asks how you are and expects an automatic "I'm fine," you feel an internal resistance because that answer feels like a lie, a collaboration with a collective falsehood that keeps everyone comfortable but disconnected from the truth. You want to talk about issues that matter, about the meaning of existence, about why we're here doing what we do, about whether there's anything more beyond this endless routine of working, consuming, distracting, and sleeping. But when you try to steer conversations into these deeper territories, you see uncomfortable looks, rapid changes of subject, or worse, that condescending tone of someone who thinks you're being too intense, too dramatic, too philosophical for a simple coffee chat. Frankl understood this not as intellectual arrogance or moral superiority on your part, but as a manifestation of the noetic dimension of human existence making itself known more urgently within you. The noetic dimension, a central concept in logotherapy, refers to the specifically human layer of existence, the one that seeks meaning, values, purpose, and transcendence. While we share biological and psychological dimensions with animals, the noetic dimension is exclusively human, and some people feel its call more intensely than others. When you experience this inability to be satisfied with the superficial, you are actually experiencing your noetic dimension demanding expression, demanding that you live on a more authentic and profound level. This inevitably creates loneliness, because you are operating on a different frequency than most people around you. But Frankl would insist that this loneliness is the necessary price of authenticity, and that trying to suppress it by forcing superficial connections only deepens the existential void you are trying to escape. The second sign appears when you feel an insatiable hunger for meaning that no external achievement seems to truly satisfy. You might have the job that's supposed to make you happy, the relationship that's supposed to complete you, the accomplishments that should make you proud, yet you still wake up in the morning feeling that hollow ache in your chest that nothing can fill. Frankl called this the will to meaning and identified it as the primary human motivation, in direct contrast to Freud, who saw pleasure as the central drive, or Adler, who emphasized power. For Frankl, based on his observations both in concentration camps and his clinical practice, humans are fundamentally oriented toward the search for meaning, and when this search is frustrated, no amount of pleasure or power can compensate for the resulting void. You might recognize this in your own life when you realize that achieving goals that were supposedly important leaves you curiously unsatisfied. You got the promotion, bought the house, traveled to the places, collected the experiences your culture told you would bring happiness, and for a few days or weeks, you might even feel a lift. But soon that familiar sense of emptiness returns, perhaps even more intensely because now you no longer have the excuse that you're unhappy because you haven't achieved these things yet. Frankl observed that in affluent societies, where basic needs are largely met, existential emptiness becomes epidemic, precisely because people have everything they supposedly need to be happy, but lack what they truly require: a clear sense of purpose that makes their lives meaningful. Your loneliness in this context is the loneliness of someone who has woken up to this truth but hasn't yet discovered where to find authentic meaning. You feel alone because you're searching for something that most people around you haven't yet realized is missing. They continue to believe that the next achievement, the next relationship, the next purchase will finally fill the void, while you already know from personal experience that this path is circular and leads nowhere. Frankl would say your loneliness here is actually an awakening, an essential first step toward a truly meaningful life, even if it feels only painful and disorienting right now. The third sign that your loneliness carries deep meaning emerges when you realize you feel more authentic alone than in the company of most people. There's a paradoxical sense of being more connected to yourself, more real, more whole when you're physically isolated than when you're surrounded by others. This might seem contradictory because our culture repeatedly tells us that human connection is the source of well-being and that isolation is pathological. But Frankl recognized that there are forms of loneliness that are actually expressions of personal integrity. In the concentration camps, Frankl observed that some prisoners maintained their inner humanity precisely through moments of internal solitude, even amidst forced and degrading physical proximity to other prisoners. These moments of introspection allowed the individual to reconnect with values, memories, and aspirations that defined who they truly were, beyond the brutal circumstances that tried to reduce them to mere organisms struggling for survival. When you experience this feeling today of being more yourself in solitude, you might be undergoing something similar. Amidst a world that constantly tries to mold you, sell you pre-packaged identities, and reduce you to demographic categories and consumer profiles, your moments of solitude become the only spaces where you can truly hear your own inner voice. Solitude becomes the place where you don't have to perform, don't have to manage impressions, don't have to conform to others' expectations. But this creates a painful dilemma. You need other human beings for a full life. Frankl never denied that, but the quality of most of your social interactions seems to push you further away from who you truly are, rather than drawing you closer. You find yourself in a position where choosing authenticity means choosing loneliness, and choosing company means sacrificing authenticity. Frankl would suggest this isn't a choice you should passively accept. Instead, this tension should motivate you to seek or create spaces for authentic connection, where you can genuinely be yourself in the presence of others, where vulnerability and depth are valued rather than avoided. Your current loneliness is signaling to you that you need a different kind of human connection. Not that you need to give up on connection entirely or settle for superficial ones. And now I want to pause here and really talk to you. I know many of you watching this video carry this existential loneliness in silence, thinking there's something wrong with you because you can't feel satisfied with the kind of life and relationships that seem to be enough for everyone around you. So tell me here in the comments, have you ever felt like you're alone even when surrounded by people? That nobody truly understands you in this search for something deeper? If so, just write, "I feel this existential loneliness." That's all. And know that by doing so, you're helping other people in the comments feel less alone. It's often liberating just to see that others are going through the exact same thing and are on this same journey of seeking meaning. Your courage to acknowledge this publicly validates the experience of dozens of others who suffer in silence, thinking they're the only ones who feel this way. Let's create a community of courage and authenticity here. The fourth sign manifests when you start questioning the structures and narratives everyone around you accepts without a second thought. And this questioning places you in an unintentional outsider position. Frankl developed the concept of self-distancing as one of our specifically human capacities, the ability to step back from yourself, your circumstances, your patterns of thought and behavior, and observe them from an external perspective. This capacity allows for growth and change because you aren't completely identified with your thoughts, emotions, or current situation. But self-distancing can also be applied to social structures, cultural narratives, and collective assumptions. When you develop this ability to step back and critically observe the stories your culture tells about what constitutes a good life, what defines success, how relationships should work, the purpose of work, you inevitably begin to notice inconsistencies, contradictions, and often a fundamental hollowness in these narratives. You realize that many of the goals your society values don't hold up to serious scrutiny when you ask what they're truly for, beyond perpetuating the system itself. Frankl saw this clearly in the post-war society, where people who had lost everything materially sometimes found more meaning in their lives than those living in abundance, but without clear purpose. When you today question if you really need the bigger house, the newer car, the constant promotion, the conventional marriage, the kids on the expected timeline, or any other marker of success your culture prescribes, you're not necessarily being rebellious or contrary by nature. You might simply be exercising this capacity for self-distancing and realizing that many of these goals are arbitrary and don't necessarily lead to what you're truly seeking, which is meaning and purpose. But this puts you in a lonely position because you can no longer naively participate in the collective narrative. When co-workers complain about not getting the expected promotion, you feel a distance because you realize this whole corporate hierarchy is an arbitrary construct that in 100 years no one will remember or care about. When friends excitedly talk about buying a house or upgrading their car, you politely engage but feel as though they're intensely invested in a game whose rules are fundamentally nonsensical. This clarity of vision, this self-distancing from dominant cultural narratives, is simultaneously liberating and isolating. Frankl would argue that this solitude is the price of consciousness, and that you shouldn't suppress this questioning capacity just to fit in socially. Instead, you need to use this clarity to actively build a life based on values and purposes you've consciously chosen, not ones imposed by external expectations. The fifth sign emerges when you experience a strange combination of deep despair and persistent hope, a sense that despite everything appearing meaningless, there must be something more. Frankl identified this as an essential characteristic of existential frustration. It's not simply nihilistic despair that concludes nothing matters and gives up, but an active tension between the perception of existence's potential absurdity and an irreducible intuition that meaning must be available somewhere. In the concentration camps, Frankl observed that prisoners who held onto some form of hope, even if it was just the hope of reuniting with a loved one or bearing witness to what happened there, had significantly higher survival rates than those who succumbed to complete despair. This hope wasn't naive optimism that everything would be okay. It was something more fundamental, a refusal to accept that suffering and existence are entirely without meaning. When you feel this peculiar combination today, when you have days where everything feels absolutely empty and aimless, but you still can't fully accept that conclusion, when a part of you keeps searching, reading, reflecting, trying to understand, despite another part being weary and wanting to give up, you are experiencing precisely this existential tension Frankl identified as deeply human. Your solitude in this state comes from the fact that you are inhabiting this liminal space between despair and hope, where most people don't linger. People around you often choose one side. Either they embrace some ready-made answer that gives them certainty and closes the question, be it a traditional religious answer or a materialist one that simply dismisses the question of meaning as irrelevant, or they dive into constant distractions so they never have to face the question. But you can't do either. You can't accept ready-made answers that seem too simplistic for the complexity of the issue, but you also can't accept that there's no answer at all. So you remain in this discomfort, this active search, and that puts you in a lonely place because few people choose to voluntarily inhabit this tense uncertainty. Frankl would say that this tension is actually the engine of existential growth. The person who has found all the answers has stopped growing, and the person who has given up on the questions has too. But you, by keeping alive this tension between despair and hope, are in the exact place where real transformation is possible. Your solitude here is the solitude of the genuine seeker, and while uncomfortable, it is infinitely more honest than the alternatives of premature certainty or cynical resignation. The sixth sign manifests when you develop an increased sensitivity to the suffering of others and an inability to ignore or normalize the world's pain. Frankl developed the concept of self-transcendence as a uniquely human capacity, alongside self-distancing, the ability and need to go beyond oneself, to connect with something or someone larger than one's own ego. Self-transcendence is expressed both in genuine love for another person and in dedication to a cause or purpose that transcends immediate personal interests. When you experience this heightened sensitivity to suffering, you might be experiencing an aspect of self-transcendence where the rigid boundaries between you and others begin to dissolve in a way. You can no longer see news of human tragedy and simply go about your day as if nothing happened. You can't walk past a homeless person without a pang in your gut. You can't hear stories of injustice, abuse, or abandonment without carrying an emotional weight that others seem to process and discard with impressive ease. This creates loneliness because you feel constantly overwhelmed by a pain that others seem to manage by compartmentalizing or ignoring, and you wonder if there's something wrong with you, if you're too weak or too sensitive to function in the real world. Frankl would suggest a radically different interpretation. Your sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's an opening into the noetic dimension, a connection to the reality of human suffering that is both a curse and a blessing. It's a curse because it makes you carry a significant emotional burden, but it's a blessing because this sensitivity can direct you toward finding meaning through self-transcendence, through dedicating your life to alleviating some form of the suffering you feel so acutely. Frankl observed in the camps that some of the most resilient prisoners were those who found ways to help other prisoners, even in circumstances where they could barely help themselves. Sharing the last piece of bread, offering a word of comfort, caring for someone who was ill, these acts of self-transcendence gave meaning to the suffering of those who practiced them. Your sensitivity to the suffering of others today might seem like just a source of pain, but Frankl would invite you to see it as a calling, an indication of where your meaning can be found. You don't feel this pain by accident or due to a psychological defect. You feel it because your noetic dimension is pointing you toward where you can make a difference, where your life can have a significant impact. The loneliness you experience isn't because you're broken. It's because you're being called to something that most people haven't yet heard. And that call, when answered through concrete action that serves others, can transform your painful sensitivity into a source of profound purpose. If these ideas are resonating deeply with you, if you feel like you've finally found someone who understands this search for genuine meaning amidst existential loneliness, subscribe to this channel. Here, we explore the thought of Viktor Frankl and other humanist philosophers weekly, offering real answers to the existential void so many of us carry in silence. You don't have to walk alone on this journey of self-discovery and meaning-making. This channel exists to be a safe space where we can explore these deep dimensions of human existence together, where vulnerability and questioning are valued, where you can be authentically you in this pursuit. Click that subscribe button and become part of this community of people brave enough to question, to seek, and to grow. And if this video is helping you see your loneliness in a new light, give it a like so that more people struggling with this same existential loneliness can discover they are not alone. and that this suffering can have profound meaning. The seventh sign appears when you realize you have difficulty motivating yourself through external rewards and punishments, that the normal incentive system that drives most people simply doesn't work for you anymore. Frankl contrasted the will to meaning with what he called the will to pleasure, inspired by Freud, and the will to power, inspired by Adler. He argued that when the will to meaning is frustrated, people often try to compensate by pursuing pleasure or power, but these substitutes are never truly satisfying because they don't address the fundamental need. You might recognize this when you notice that threats or promises related to money, status, social approval, or material comfort simply don't move you as they should. Your boss might offer a bigger bonus or threaten professional consequences, but some part of you remains curiously indifferent because you know neither the bonus nor the consequences will resolve the fundamental emptiness you feel. Friends might encourage you with promises of fun or pleasure if you join certain activities, but you can barely muster the energy to show up because you know from experience that these pleasures are fleeting and leave you feeling even more hollow afterward. This doesn't mean you don't appreciate comfort or pleasure when available, but it means they've stopped functioning as primary motivators because you've woken up to the fact that this isn't what you're here for. Frankl would say you're experiencing the frustration of the will to meaning, and that no amount of pleasure or power will alleviate this frustration. The only real solution is to find activities and commitments that genuinely respond to your need for meaning. This creates loneliness because you become incomprehensible to an entire social system built on the assumption that people are motivated by external rewards and punishments. When these levers don't work on you, you become a problem, an anomaly that's difficult to manage. Employers don't know what to do with you. Relationships become confusing because partners try to please you with things that simply don't touch you anymore. And even you yourself become confused about what truly motivates you if it's not the usual things. Frankl would insist that this is actually a liberation, even if it doesn't feel like it. You're being forced to find deeper, more authentic motivations, to build a life oriented by consciously chosen values and purposes rather than external conditioning. But in the short term, it leaves you disoriented and isolated, operating on an internal logic that others don't understand or share. The eighth and final sign that your solitude carries profound meaning emerges when you begin to realize that your quest isn't to eliminate suffering, but to imbue it with significance. This may be Frankl's most revolutionary discovery, and the one that most deeply challenges our contemporary culture, obsessed with comfort and the eradication of all pain. In the concentration camps, Frankl observed that it wasn't the absence of suffering that kept people alive and human, but the presence of meaning that made suffering bearable and even transformative. He saw prisoners who had relatively more comfort but no purpose wither and die, while others in even more brutal conditions but with some reason to live, some meaning that gave purpose to their suffering, managed to persevere. This led Frankl to a radical conclusion. The human being does not primarily seek to avoid suffering or achieve pleasure, but to find meaning, and when there is sufficient meaning, one can bear almost any quantum of suffering. When you realize today that your quest has shifted from trying to eliminate your existential pain to trying to understand it and give it meaning, you are aligning with this profound Franklian insight. You might notice you are no longer looking for the perfect meditation technique that will make anxiety disappear, or the ideal medication that will eliminate sadness, or the magical relationship that will fill the void. Instead, you are asking different questions. What is my anxiety trying to tell me? Where is my sadness pointing me? What is this emptiness calling me to fill through meaningful action? This shift in orientation from elimination to signification is profound, but it puts you out of sync with an entire culture dedicated to selling solutions for eliminating discomfort. When you're no longer in the market for products, services, or relationships that promise to make your pain disappear, when you are seeking something more fundamental, meaning and purpose that make pain bearable and even valuable, you become a kind of outsider to an entire happiness and wellness industry. This creates a profound form of solitude because you can no longer participate in conversations about the latest quick fixes for anxiety or depression with the same enthusiasm others do. You know those solutions, Even when they work temporarily, don't touch the real issue. Frankl would tell you that you are absolutely right in this intuition. He spent his life arguing against what he called the homeostatic orientation of traditional psychology, the idea that the goal is to return the person to a state of tensionless equilibrium. Instead, Frankl proposed that a healthy tension between what we are and what we could be, between our current state and a meaning that calls to us, is essential for genuine mental health. When you accept your solitude, not as something to be cured, but as something to be understood as part of your search for meaning, you are doing exactly what Frankl would recommend. Your solitude in this context is not pathology. It is part of the process of becoming fully human, of taking on the existential responsibility for your life that no one else can assume for you. So now, having explored these 8 signs, the urgent question becomes, what do you do with this existential solitude that you now understand carries profound meaning? Frankl didn't offer ready-made answers because he recognized that meaning cannot be universally prescribed. It needs to be discovered individually through what he called existential responsibility. Each person has a unique meaning to fulfill in their specific life, in their particular circumstances, and no one can do it for them. But Frankl did offer directions, pathways to finding that meaning. First, through what you create or accomplish in the world, the work you do not as mere employment but as a significant contribution. Second, through what you experience or whom you encounter, authentic connections with other human beings and with beauty or truth wherever you find it. And third, and perhaps most radically, through the attitude you take toward inevitable suffering that cannot be changed. When you cannot change a situation, you can still choose how you face it, and in that choice lies a form of meaning that no external circumstance can destroy. Your existential solitude, viewed through this Franklian lens, is not a problem to be solved through more socialization or less introspection. It is a call to be answered through meaningful action, through authentic connections that honor your depth, through creation that expresses your values, and through taking responsibility for the only life you have. Solitude may not disappear completely. Frankl didn't promise that. But it can be transformed from a meaningless burden into a significant companion on an authentic journey. You have chosen, perhaps without realizing it, the harder path. The path of authenticity in a world of superficiality. The path of genuine seeking in a culture of ready-made answers. The path of existential responsibility in an age of outsourcing meaning. This choice inevitably brings solitude. But Frankl, who knew solitude and suffering in their most extreme forms and still found meaning, would assure you that this conscious, chosen solitude is infinitely preferable to the alternative of unconscious connection with a meaningless life. So let me ask you finally, now that you understand your solitude can carry profound meaning, that it might be calling you to something greater than simply fitting in or conforming, what will you do with this understanding? Share in the comments one concrete step you can take this week to answer this call for meaning that your solitude represents. And if you haven't already, subscribe now to continue this journey of exploring Frankl's thought and discover more tools for transforming existential suffering into a meaningful life. You are not alone in this quest, and together we can build a community where depth and authenticity are not solitary anomalies, but shared values that genuinely connect us to one another.